And we're straight into the match. We've got both players looking at their opening hands. Shaun's going to start us off with a Forest and one of those Wayfarer's baubles that he prioritized so highly during the draft. Looks like Shaun may have mulliganed. I see only 4 cards in his hand.
And that's one of the risks of course, building that 5-color deck. You just might not get the mana sources that you need.
Yeah, a couple of bounce lands in Shaun's hand may allow him to undo that mulligan to some degree, but I only see a couple of spells in the hand, so maybe that's what he ends up short on. We see a Fiery Fall. I believe that is at the front of Danny's hand.
Mm-hmm. Both players starting with a bounce land for the game. Oh, and of course, so Danny is on the draw, and he didn't mulligan, so he had to actually discard that mountain, it looked like.
We'll see. So Shaun, considering his play, can't play another bounce land right away. That wouldn't get him very far. He'd have to pick one of them up. But we know he has that basic.
Yeah, he could always use the bauble first and then play the bounce land.
Yeah, so Shaun considering his options. We will likely, we will see him activate that Wayfarer's Bauble, getting an island. Previously, I believe he did not have access to blue mana. The other bounce land in his hand is a Golgari Rot Farm, so that will give him access to black mana. And we see Niv Mizzet up on the screen, which also appears to be in Shaun's hand. So Air Servant and Niv Mizzet, if you're only going to have a couple spells, those are certainly powerhouses to work with.
Yeah, Niv Mizzet can draw you back into the game if let untap.
So importantly, Shaun has 1 blue source and 1 red source. Niv Mizzet requires 2 blue and 2 red sources, so even though Shaun has 5 mana and Niv Mizzet costs 6, he's actually at least 2 turns away from being able to cast it. But we see the Air Servant come down here, representing 4 points of flying power that puts Danny on the clock, requires him to have an answer here before he starts taking a lot of damage.
Sure,
and I think that's an All Sun's Dawn in Shaun's hand.
Oh yeah, hiding behind the corner there. Looks like he is going to play it.
So it looks like he's opted for that, and Danny, Dimir Aqueduct, returning that mountain, and then just discarding for his turn.
Yeah, looks like he has 2 mountains in his graveyard now. Remember, he had to discard a land for the first bounce, and now he has to discard another one for the second.
So I believe that was Telling Time, drawn by Shaun. And tapping 3 mana, he may just... okay, so he's also, I believe, got a Cathodian. And a little bit awkward here. The blue mana, okay, so he's going to use the blue mana for the Telling Time.
And then 1 floating.
He has 1 mana remaining, and just going to consider his options here. He can, of course, tap that Gruul Turf and drop the Cathodian to keep the pressure up. He may have seen something in those 3 cards that he would rather play.
Yes.
We'll just see how this turn plays out.
Now, I was mentioning during the deck list that Danny's only running 11 basics. He opted to take a lot of the bounce lands, and we're kind of seeing it punish him here. Starting off very slow, even though he's only 3 colors. The blue and the white actually not doing anything for his deck that I can see here.
Yeah, not that I can see from just a quick glance at the list. And we see Shaun considering those cards. We see a Tribal Flames, we see a Dread Drone, and I believe that's an Evolving Wilds in the back. So Dread Drone on the bottom, Evolving Wilds in the hand, and Tribal Flames on top. Evolving Wilds, if that is what it is, important for Shaun to get his additional sources of red and blue for that Niv Mizzet. So we will see the Gruul Turf tapped. We will see the Cathodian come out. It's important to note that if Shaun sacrifices that Evolving Wilds, he will shuffle away the Tribal Flames that he knows is on top, which is generally, a card he's going to want to draw and be able to, kill one of his opponent's threats with. Although only 1 basic land type there.
Certainly, but he does have that mountain in his hand, so if he does go and get an island at the end of turn, he's able to cast the Niv Mizzet.
Okay, so a reasonable trade-off.
Sure.
you know, you're not gonna, if you sack it, you're not necessarily gonna draw the Tribal Flames anymore. But Shaun's deck full of powerful cards.
Oh, a nice little interaction here.
Okay, wow.
From
So
Danny.
that Kozilek's Predator is going to produce 2 Eldrazi spawn. Each of Danny's lands that aren't the mountain tapping for 2, 5 mana, uses the final mana, the black mana for a Bone Splinters, sacrifice one of the Eldrazi spawns, kill that Air Servant.
And now we see a great opportunity for Shaun to play the Niv Mizzet after seeing Danny use one of his Bone Splinters. Now, we know, looking at the deck list here, Danny actually has 2 Bone Splinters and some other nice ways to deal with Niv Mizzet, including the Fiery Fall already in his hand, which he actually has multiple of them as well.
Yeah, so normally 4 toughness being a bit actually safe in this format from Sunlance, Lightning Bolt, Nameless Inversion, some of those cards we mentioned. But Danny's removal suite seems to be perfectly able to kill that Niv Mizzet.
We do in fact see the Niv Mizzet come down. Danny probably not too concerned unless he doesn't have that other additional land source in hand to cast a Fiery Fall, but he in fact does.
Okay, he does have a land. Niv Mizzet bites the dust, and we may see an All Suns Dawn.
I certainly
maybe?
hope
Are we
so.
going to see a huge All Suns Dawn here? So what could he return right now? I believe right now he could actually only get back the Niv Mizzet and one of the blue cards.
Correct.
So
Only
likely only Air Servant and Niv Mizzet. Still very strong. We'll see if he fires that off or if he waits. I think his hand is lands besides that.
Yeah, you might as well do it. I mean, you're just drawing 2 gas cards, right?
Yeah, I think he's happy to pay 5 mana to get 2 of the strongest cards in his deck from his graveyard back into his hand.
You got to feel pretty confident after that. And in fact, if he's able to...
Oh,
he's getting the Telling Time. Interesting. Well,
okay.
he must know that he has more powerful cards in the deck and that he'd rather just dig to them and potentially not hit any more land drops.
Yeah, he likely feels that the Telling Time is going to find him something equivalent to the Air Servant while also fixing his draws. And now that he has so much mana, the 2 mana for that Telling Time is just not consequential.
Yeah. And actually, he can cast it at the end of Danny's turn here. So also a little bit of a thing to note.
So we see 5, 6 mana, 2 black and a green for that Drooling Grudian that we saw going around and around and around in the last draft. Great with that Eldrazi spawn there. And a Boros Garrison from Danny. A 3rd bounce land, so access to 7 mana right now, 8 with the spawn, 9 with the land on his next turn. And I think I see an Etched Oracle in Danny's hand as well, a card that Shaun McLaren passed in this draft for, don't quite recall, but something similarly very powerful.
Yeah, and actually that's a good reason for Danny to run a few of those bounce lands. The Etched Oracle being very easy to turn on here for full counters.
So we see Shaun not firing off that Telling Time, and I believe the draw step netted him a Electrolyze.
Now, why wouldn't you cast the Telling Time at end of turn there? Is there a good reason?
I'm not sure. Telling Time doesn't draw the card, so it doesn't get you an extra point of damage off Niv Mizzet. Is that correct?
Yeah, you reveal.
And you put the card into your hand.
Put your card into your hand.
So Niv Mizzet, for those of you at home, 4/4 Flying Dragon. Whenever Shaun draws a card, he's going to be able to deal 1 damage to a creature or a player. He can also tap the Niv Mizzet to draw an additional card. That Electrolyze draws another card. So Shaun really very close to being able to just sweep Danny's board, but Danny with a Hellkite Charger, a 5/5 Flying Haste, and a Bone Splinters. Wow, okay, so the Bone Splinters takes down the Niv Mizzet. The Hellkite Charger is going to come down because of that 2 red Boros Garrison Mountain and 9 damage coming across to Shaun.
That is a huge turn of events. Danny being able to deal with Niv Mizzet not only once, but twice with the 2 Bone Splinters that we know he has in his deck. Oh, he also used a Fiery Fall, I'm sorry. The Bone Splinters took out the Air Servant previously.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, Danny just puts Shaun completely on the back foot here. Skyreach Manta the draw for Shaun. Electrolyze in hand, Telling Time in hand. And he needs to find a way to stop this now, or the Hellkite Charger is going to allow Danny to get 2 attack steps.
Mana Leak, not what he wants to see. An additional Skyreach Manta, and I think a Wayfarer's Bauble are the 3 cards.
Yeah, the Mana Leak just 1 turn too late. And not quite enough blue to cast both the Niv Mizzet and another blue spell. We see, considering the Skyreach Manta.
Mana Leak on top, Bauble on the bottom. The problem is, Shaun doesn't have white mana, so if he plays Manta, it can only chump the Hellkite Charger.
Yeah, it can chump the Hellkite Charger. It could trade with the Grudian,
Sure.
although the Hellkite Charger attacking twice would put Shaun down to 1.
Yeah, and Danny does have some burn cards in his deck that he could draw after getting Shaun to 1.
So we see Shaun with just a couple of Skyreach Mantas in hand, a Mountain, and an Electrolyze. And okay, he has mana to play a 3/3
Well, that works, yeah.
Manta.
Holding up Electrolyze.
Yeah, leaves up that Electrolyze mana, and still that trades with the Grudian. Although if Danny has a creature in his hand, he may be able to activate the Grudian's ability. Probably can't do that and activate the Hellkite Charger.
No, yeah, he doesn't have enough mana, even though he does have quite a bit. The draw for the turn is, another Fiery Fall, I think that was.
Fiery Fall again. So Danny with some options here. Could Fiery Fall, could deploy that Etched Oracle, although doing either of those things is going to cut him off from that additional attack step.
True.
And looks like he is Fiery Falling the Skyreach Manta.
Yep.
I think this is the safer play. Plays around maybe an instant speed removal spell from Shaun, gets another one of Shaun's permanents off the table, and an attack for 9 here. A second attack for 9, 2 turns in a row. Shaun down to 2. Danny with that Etched Oracle in hand, and what is Shaun going to do here?
Well, he's got to just pop off the Electrolyze, draw a card. I think the one outer he has in his deck list is that Savage Twister we saw him take earlier.
Oh, so he does have that, and he has plenty of mana to... Okay, we see a Repeal.
I don't think he has quite enough
mana for a Mantis and a Repeal? Both of Danny's cards cost 6, which, as we talked about, a liability, but in this case, a little bit of upside. Yeah, I am not seeing it for Shaun. The Repeal may draw him into something.
It'd have to be very cheap, right? He has access to 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It'd have to cost 3 mana.
Yeah, and the Repeal on the Hellkite Charger doesn't even help because that creature does have haste. So Shaun, considering his options, figuring out the best course of action here, going with the Repeal on his own turn so that if he draws a sorcery, he can still cast it.
So I think Shaun needs to leave up a red here because he has Tribal Flames in his deck. He can... Oh, never mind. He cannot repeal... Or sorry, Tribal Flames enough for the
can't get that 5th... okay, so we're seeing a card draw, Lightning Bolt drawn, and with just a Mana Leak in hand, I think Shaun is going to pass the turn and see if Danny reveals any more information before this game ends.
Go to combat.
Danny's going to attack, and that's the first game. So Danny Goldstein is now up a game against Shaun McLaren in Grand Prix Las Vegas, the quarterfinals here. And let's look at these players' sideboards and see what we think might come in.
I see on Danny's side he has at least 1 Waking Nightmare that he might bring in. Ooh, main deck already has a Puppeteer Click, which seems pretty good. 2 Waking Nightmares now, as I'm looking over the deck list. Now, we were talking about how against the 5-color deck, those seem very, very solid, but I wonder if Danny thinks the same. We see him pull a few cards from the sideboard.
When you need to find your lands, you're fixing your spells, and you need it all to come together, you really don't want to suddenly be discarding 2 cards. It can really throw a wrench in your plans, especially after you've fetched for a specific land type. You've made some decisions that you can't really go back on, and now you're getting hit with discard 2 cards. Makes you reevaluate your plan. So Sickle Ripper, shuffle to the front. 2-1 for 2 with Wither, nice against the aggressive decks.
Certainly.
Probably not what Danny's in the market for against Shaun.
And a reassembling Skeleton as well. Again, not very good against that 5-color deck. And if Danny can land some of those, discard spells against Shaun, Shaun's probably going to be waking up in a nightmare. All right, C-, that was bad. What about Shaun's sideboard? What does he have?
So in Shaun's sideboard, we've got a Sylvan Bounty, which may be nice against an aggressive deck, probably not coming in against Danny though. We've got an Ulamog's Crusher, which might come in normally against a 5-color deck, very resilient to removal, but not the 2 Bone Splinters that Danny showed Shaun in Game 1. So maybe not bringing that in. We've got a Stoic Rebuttal, another counterspell effect for Shaun, which is great in this 5-color or 4-color plus matchup, but it depends on if he feels like he has access to the double blue early enough. Shaun also has a Waking Nightmare, which he may bring in to sort of battle on that card advantage front. We also see Sundering Vitae and Tarashi's Grasp, and I believe that's all for the disenchant effects, which we know from the last draft Shaun prioritizes very highly. He didn't see any artifacts, though.
He did not see any.
There was an Etched Champion that we saw in the hand, but Shaun never saw that, so not sure which way he's going to go there. I think I did catch a glimpse of the Waking Nightmares
I think so
coming in
too.
for Danny.
I love it.
And I really like this. So Danny potentially, so Shaun in this matchup could choose to draw.
Yeah.
But with how many bounce lands both players have, I believe he'll want to be on the play. The Waking Nightmare even better on the draw. Your opponent doesn't have that extra card. You're trading one of your cards for 2 of theirs, cutting into their resources, which can be especially devastating against that 4 or 5-color deck that needs all of its pieces.
Yeah, it looked like substantial changes for each player. It looked like 3 or 4 cards.
Yeah, 3 or 4 cards from Danny, a couple cards from Shaun. I guess I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Shaun did bring in that Ulamog's Crusher. While it is not strong against Bone Splinters, Shaun is going to need to stick some large threat. And Danny has those Bone Splinters in his deck. So maybe Shaun feels like he needs to be more large threat heavy dense, basically. We talk about threat dense in the sense of like 2 and 3 drops in your curve to fight against removal sometimes. There's also the sense of threat dense in this control mirror match where Shaun does actually need to have more threats than Danny has answers over the course of the game. He can kill everything Danny plays, but if he doesn't finish the game, he's just giving Danny time to draw out of that.
And I'm pretty sure I saw Danny bring in Death Denied from his sideboard, which is really going to put, a hamper in all of Shaun's removal spells.
Yeah, so we saw Shaun using All Sun's Dawn there to get back a couple of resources after they'd traded a lot of things across, and Danny bringing in Death Denied, similarly to grind it out, get to that late game, and then have this explosive turn where he returns 4 or maybe 5 creatures, and Shaun not putting a lot of pressure on, a 1 for 5, if you're given time to cast all those spells, is really backbreaking.
Yeah, the game went pretty late. Each player had access to 7 or 8 mana at the very least.
Yeah, the game ended suddenly. It did go late. It ended suddenly, but only because Danny had that Hellkite Charger to suddenly change the math substantially.
Correct.
So 5 cards, 6, 7 for Danny, and I only saw Dimir Aqueduct in there.
Yep.
I think he's going to mulligan, and Shaun.
It's a forest.
Yeah, I see a couple of lands in hand. He did sideboard in that Ulamog's Crusher. It appears he also has a Spite Bellows and a Nest Invader.
I think he also had a Lightning Bolt hiding back there right next to his lands.
Yeah, so a good hand for Shaun. A forest, enough lands, that Nest Invader, which is sort of exactly what he wants to be playing on turn 2, and that Crusher to come down late game and force Danny to have an answer or lose almost immediately. I mean, once you start getting attacked by an Ulamog's Crusher, you're in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, you don't get attacked much more.
Yeah, the Annihilator 2 on that, the 8/8 does have to attack each turn, but every time it attacks because of Annihilator 2, the defending player has to sacrifice 2 permanents.
Yeah,
so the dynamic of this game here is really going to be both players keeping the board clean, trying to execute their late game strategy, and just who can do that better, who can do that first, who can do that unanswered.
It's funny to think that Annihilator is actually really, really good versus all of the bounce lands, right? Because now your opponent's has more of their basics in hand, fewer actual permanents to sacrifice to Annihilator. So I think the Crusher was a really nice sideboard choice.
Yeah, that's a great point, that even on turn 8 or 9, you may only have 5 lands in play, as we saw Danny have last game. Tons of bounce lands in his deck. And we do see that turn 2 Nest Invader here for Shaun. Telling Time, Cathodian in hand for Shaun. I guess we'll likely see the 3/3 follow-up here. And Shaun could actually have a pretty aggressive start.
Yeah, surprisingly for a 5-color deck, he has the 2-drop into Cathodian, and if he hits another red source, he can, just evoke the Spite Bellows to take care of anything Danny does.
Yeah, get rid of a blocker that maybe Danny's planning to use. Okay, I think he did draw a mountain just there. So we are going to see that mountain come down, Cathodian, attack for 2, Shaun representing 5 damage on the board here with that 2/2 and that 3/3 that he just played. And as you mentioned, the Spite Bellows to clear out a blocker. We could see this game end surprisingly quickly. That Necro Skitter, I imagine, is going to get snap, Spite Bellows. Shaun is not interested in any of his creatures going over to Danny's side.
Yeah, that's a really good draw for Danny, or a really nice play, but again, the Spite Bellows is just going to take care of that.
So evoke on the Spite Bellows, which means he sacrifices immediately, but when it leaves play, it deals 6, taking out that 1/4. And we'll see what Danny can follow up with, down to already just 13 life.
He finds his green source, which lets him cast a Kozilek's Predator, which, again,
excellent card from Danny.
I think both players would be happy to have that card in multiples in their decks.
So we're going to see Shaun here get an island, access to all 3 of his main-ish colors now. Also with a swamp in the deck, at the very least. Maybe a Plains after sideboard, we're not sure. But his main 3 colors, blue, red, and green, all of which he has access to now.
Let's see if Shaun has a way to deal with the Predator, or just wants to trade it away with the Cathodian. See a Telling Time in Shaun's hand?
I think he just drew Wolfbriar Elemental.
Oh, yeah.
Only 1 green source, though. So maybe that Telling Time, he's looking for that to find him some more green sources. He can kick that Wolfbriar Elemental a couple times. We see the 3/3 come over, offer the trade. We do see that trade happen. And Shaun's going to use the 3 mana from the Cathodian dying to just get a little freebie on that Telling Time.
One little ramp there.
And I saw a Lightning Bolt, a Skyreach Manta, and is that last card a Wildfire?
So no lands, though, in the top 3, which means he's not going to draw one next turn because, again, one of the cards has to go on top of the library.
Okay, so he has a Swamp in hand, but yeah, a little bit stalled on lands there if he's planning to get to 8 mana to cast that. And Shaun really thinking hard. All 3 of those spells, powerful. Like the Manta can come down as a 4/4. The Lightning Bolt can take care of potentially what Danny plays next. As powerful a card as Lightning Bolt is, I kind of wouldn't be surprised if it ends up on the bottom.
And it looks like the Manta went on top. I didn't see what went in hand. It looks like the Bolt.
So the Bolt in hand, and if that was a Wildfire, it ended up on the bottom. I'm not sure if it was or not. Swamp comes down for Shaun. Looks like Shaun's plan is to get that Manta out there as a 4/4. Maybe considering the Bolt as something he can finish Danny off with, if he's able to get a couple flying attacks in. What's in Danny's hand? We can see a Selesnya Sanctuary.
I know he has a Fiery Fall at the very least.
Fiery Fall. And Danny just considering here his options with just 2 of those Eldrazi spawn in play.
He does have access to a bunch of mana, but we know he has a lot of red cards in his deck. Again, double green for the Hellkite Charger makes this kind of draw a little bit awkward.
Yeah, so we see the Sanctuary come down, the Swamp return to Danny's hand, the Manta will be drawn here, in all likelihood coming down as a 4/4. But awkward for Shaun, 2 of those cards stranded in his hand.
Oh, so I guess Danny has a Palaka Worm that he brought in. Actually, you know what? Palaka Worm's not even in his main deck. It's sideboarded, and he brought it in against Shaun after the game 1.
Oh, wow. So just like Shaun brought in that Ulamog's Crusher, Danny also felt that he wanted to make his deck more threat dense, brings in that Palaka Worm.
Yes. So you might be wondering why Pelakka Worm isn't in the main of Danny's deck. Well, he's only running 3 basic forests and then has just a few of those bounce lands to produce other green. So it might be a little bit harder for him to cast it.
So I would say that if he feels like he has plenty of time in the matchup to find those 3 green sources, maybe he's bringing the Pelakka Worm in. We see a Spread the Sickness here, 5 mana, destroy a creature, proliferate. Danny not taking advantage of the proliferate, but certainly happy to get that Manta off the table. Electrolyze the draw for Shaun, card that he won a Pro Tour with.
Is that accurate? I think so. Modern, yeah.
Did he his Jeskai control deck? And Lightning Bolt, I believe, was in that deck too.
Sure.
So cards Shaun's very familiar with.
Well, this is in fact Modern Masters. So.
Yeah, we're maybe going for that.
Oh.
So Shaun's hand, still those 2 uncastable spells in Wolfbriar and Crusher, but he can cast both the Electrolyze and the Lightning Bolt. And we'll see Electrolyze here. So something that's interesting,
yes.
Shaun not targeting both tokens, because Danny could sacrifice them both in response and counter the Electrolyze, causing Shaun to not draw a card. So he only gets 1 token off that.
Because there's still 1 legal target, being Danny, the spell will draw Shaun that card. And I think we mentioned that actually yesterday during part of the sealed portion.
Yeah, it came up quite a few times.
Yeah.
We're going to actually see Danny use that mana from the spawn that he sacrificed to basic land cycle that Fiery Fall.
Sure.
And Shaun, off the Electrolyze, picked up a Tribal Flames. So Shaun actually, after the 1 point that brought Danny down to 8, Tribal Flames is 4, Lightning Bolt is 3.
Wow.
Danny effectively at 1 and doesn't know it.
Well,
doesn't know about the Lightning Bolt, doesn't know about the Tribal Flames in hand.
But with that forest that Danny searched up, he can cast the Pelakka Worm if he does get that other turn.
Okay, so that would jump him all the way back up to 15.
Effectively, yes. Oh,
So-
and of course it is his turn yes, so.
Yeah, we'll see if he chooses to do that. I imagine he will.
Oh, wow. He drew a Vengeful Rebirth, too. So even if that Pelakka Worm dies, he can aim the Vengeful Rebirth, at Shaun or anything, deal 7 damage, get back the Pelakka Worm. That seems very, very good.
So draw the card off the Pelakka Worm dying if it dies.
Exactly.
Vengeful Rebirth, 7 damage. Pelakka Worm, another 7/7 and another 7 life. So Danny could really put this game pretty far out of reach if things go a certain way. And now Shaun, maybe on that burn plan, not looking as solid right now.
Now remember, he does still have that Ulamog's Crusher, and he's only 1 mana away from casting it now. Crusher does do a pretty good job of trumping the Pelakka Worm.
And it looks like besides the Vengeful Rebirth, Danny's hand may be all lands. Either all lands or 1 other spell. And we see him pick up an Expedition map.
Another source of land. This one, unlike the bubble, puts the land into play, but you don't have to just search for a basic. You can find any land, so if he wants to find a bounce land, he could go ahead and do that.
Yeah, and we see Danny considering his options.
Not many when you
Might
have
see-
a grip full
okay.
of land.
We see an attack here from Danny. Now at a very safe 15 life. I like that attack there. Really, interesting that Shaun was so disciplined with his mana and is now in this position where he can't cast that Wolfbriar Elemental. Feel kind of bad for him that he was prioritizing the mana fixing and it just didn't quite come together here.
Still, when you're running 4 or 5 colors, you take that risk no matter what's going to happen, even if you have a bunch of colorless fixing.
Yeah, and this is something we've seen happen a number of times this weekend. People, I would say, undervaluing the consistency of the 2 color decks, even though they are less powerful. We see an Orzhov Basilica here for Danny, a black-white bounce land. And he's just going to continue to make land drops, continue to build up his mana base.
Slowly thinning his deck too.
Yeah, we see that come down, pick up the forest. And Shaun picks up an All Sun's Dawn. Okay, so he has a blue, a red, and a blue-red card in his graveyard. He can only get back 2 of those. Telling Time, Spite Bellows, and Electrolyze.
Neither of which, or none of which, deal with the Pelakka Worm unless used in conjunction. Electrolyze and Spite Bellows, for instance.
Okay, so we're going to start with a Tribal Flames for 4 on the Palaka Worm, and then the Lightning Bolt, and are we going to see that Vengeful Rebirth that you talked about?
I wouldn't be surprised if Danny doesn't have any other good plays.
I think we might see the Vengeful Rebirth go upstairs and bring Shaun down to 6 life.
And that means that the Palaka Worm on the recast will be lethal by itself. Looks like Danny drew a Nest Invader off that Palaka Worm trigger.
So Danny may be very close.
Oh no. Danny drew a
Bone Splitters.
So
even if Shaun, yeah,
goes for that Crusher next turn. Danny even has the Eldrazi spawn token to sacrifice to the Bone Splinters. This is just brutal.
Yeah, the Eldrazi spawn staying around from much earlier in the game. Danny just trying to figure out what lands he actually needs to tap to cast this Vengeful Rebirth. Sometimes it can be quite complicated with all those bounce lands.
Vengeful Rebirth for 7. Get back my Palaka Worm. Words you do not want to hear your opponent say.
Yeah, very powerful play here. Looks like he is going to go with that.
This is going to put him back up to 20 if he stays at 13 until next turn.
Yeah, if he's able to cast that Palaka Worm, he will be at back to 20, back to his starting life total with Shaun at 6. I imagine he's targeting Shaun and not the Nest Invader. Rebirth getting, maybe they're getting some confirmation about some details of that card.
The card itself is going to be exiled, Vengeful Rebirth, just so that you can't loop 2 Vengeful Rebirths.
Yeah, 6 mana, 6 damage over and over again. So he is returning the Palaka Worm and pointing at Shaun. Yeah, I think we're going to see Shaun go down to 6 here. Palaka Worm back in hand.
Shaun has no other option but to shrug and take the damage and hope that the Crusher is able to come out next turn. But again, we know that Danny has that Bone Splitters.
Yeah, and we see a Nest Invader follow up.
Looks like an island was drawn for Shaun. Okay. So he seems to be, I mean, in his mind, he seems to be in okay shape.
Yeah, he got what he wanted. He got the island to cast the Crusher, but we know that, as you mentioned, it is likely not going to be enough. Danny still needs to get through with that Palaka Worm.
Well,
so we could see, I don't know, we could see Shaun draw an answer to that, but the Crusher not going to hold up under the weight of the Bone Splinters that could come out next turn.
And even if Danny didn't have Bone Splitters, remember, the Ulamog's Crusher has to attack each turn of able. So Danny could just, take a hit if he really wanted to and have that Palaka Worm to attack the following turn.
Yeah, sacrifice a couple of his extra permanents. He has plenty there. And Shaun picking up 5 mana, maybe considering that All Sun's Dawn. Okay, so he is going to start off with the All Sun's Dawn here. And it looks like, again, going for that Telling Time.
Telling Time and either one of his 3 burn spells.
So Shaun knows that Danny has a Palaka Worm that he has to deal with.
Yes.
We could... So the Electrolyze plus Spike Bellow is not an option because there's not 3 red. That would add up to 8 damage, but not
in one turn.
Enough because he couldn't cast them both. And he can't pick up the Lightning Bolt and the Tribal Flames because they are both red cards.
Yes.
So for his red card, he chooses Electrolyze. For his blue card, he chooses Telling Time. This tells us he feels like he needs to find something else.
Yeah, and he has a turn before Danny can cast the Palaka Worm, so Telling Time at the end of Danny's turn is hopefully going to draw, well, what Shaun hopes to be an answer to any of that.
Yeah, I want to see a game 3 between these two players. I think Danny is very much in the driver's seat right now, but we'll see what Shaun can come up with. Fiery Fall, I believe, was the draw for Danny. So that much damage, not enough to kill the Crusher. We know the Bone Splinters is there, though.
Big Daddy Palaka Worm.
All right, 3 green. Definitely got to have 3 green. That white, and then looking for 3 more colorless. He's going to choose the Basilica. And might need to tap one more for that.
Yeah, I think so. In any case, he's gaining another 7 life, going back to 20, restarting his life total. Shaun, who was once 1 point away from burning Danny out, is now staring down, opponent with full life, a 7/7 trampler, a grip full of cards still, and yet, while he's struggling to find anything.
Yeah, it looks like Danny was just choosing whether to have that last mana be from the Dimir Aqueduct. He also looked at the Bone Splinters. I wonder if he was considering taking out that Nest Invader and starting to get in for more damage. Remember, Shaun is at 6, so Danny may have felt, trade the token for the Nest Invader, have 2 attackers, but I like the way he played this. Telling Time, what do we see? Oh, Savage Twister.
There's a good one.
Okay, does he have enough? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No, he doesn't. He's
No,
one
and
short.
Shaun doesn't have a land in there.
No. Or a land to put on top.
Yeah, we see a repeal. Looks like the Savage Twister is going to go to the hand. And did you catch which card went to the top?
I think the Bauble went on top, but I could be incorrect. I mean, he can still cast the Crusher this turn.
Okay, so it looks like the repeal was the draw for Shaun.
So it was the repeal that went on top.
And even just to repeal that Palaka Worm, he would need to sack his Eldrazi spawn, which for now would cut him off from the Crusher. Yeah, Shaun, a lot for him to deal with right now. Looks like, okay, looks like he's going to start. Oh. All right, and we know that if Danny sees it with the Bone Splinters, okay, and that's the hand. So Shaun McLaren is defeated by Danny Goldstein there.